Okay, shall we get going? All right. Well, hello everybody, and welcome to today's webinar entitled "The Real Role of Management in Agile Organization." This will be the last of our webinars for this year, so I want to thank all of you who have joined us over the last few months for the many presentations that we've given, and hope that we'll be able to see you again in the new year when we restart on January the 12th. But today we're going to hopefully offer some new perspectives on the subject at hand here, and perhaps offer some confirming views and some challenging views on some of the ideas that might be out there. We were to have 4 panelists with us today to help discuss this, but unfortunately Arne Olander from Sweden is not able to join us, so we're down to 3 guys, but I think a lot of you will know these people, and I'm sure they'll be able to pick up the slack for Arne. So our panelists today are Cadet, who is in Germany, Tom Mellor, who is in the US, and Kurt Nielsen, who is in the mothership in Denmark. And we'll be hearing from all of them a little bit later on. The format of what we're going to do today is going to be a little bit different from what we have done in the past. And we thought, because we have so many bright and energetic people joining us today, thought that we would actually put you to work for a change today. So in a few minutes, I'm going to show you some things. In fact, I can show you them now. In fact, why don't I do that? I have the power to do this. So what we plan for today is we put 4 questions on the screen here, and then under each question there's sub-thoughts there, and we'll be talking a little bit more about that later on. So the 4 questions are: what does Agile management mean where you live? First question. The second question is: what is misunderstood aspect of Agile management? Number 3 is: what do you find most challenging about Agile management in your region? And number 4, how are Agile managers measured in their performance? What we're going to do is, in a little while, we're going to create some breakout rooms and ask you to join a breakout room which that you most want to discuss here. So the 4 questions, you're free to choose any one of those questions. And if I go to the next slide, it'll explain this a little bit better here. So if you want to discuss question number 1, we'll have 2 breakout rooms for you to go to. You can either go to room number 1 or room number 2. And the reason why there are 2 rooms is because we didn't know how many people were going to come today. We don't think it's particularly useful to you if there are 30 people in one room. So we created 2 rooms. So if you look in a room and it looks like it's got too many people in there to hold a useful conversation, you can check out of that one and you can go into another room. So the same, so question 2 is rooms 3 and 4. Question 3 is rooms 5 and 6, and question 4 is rooms 7 and 8. Now, when you get there, what you're going to see, we're going to give you a link, a mural board. And the mural board looks exactly like this. So if you're in groups 1 or 2, you're going to be dealing with question number 1. And you can see up there in the top left-hand corner, there are some purple and some yellow Post-it notes. So what we'd like you to do in the rooms is spend a few minutes with your colleagues, discuss the question, and then start picking up the Post-it notes and jotting down your comments. And then what we're going to do is we're going to take your input to this. We're going to give you about minutes in the rooms to do this. And then the panel is going to discuss some of your ideas, add some ideas of their own, and there'll be a general panel discussion after that. We've got a few things to do to finish up after we've gone through that. And hopefully there'll be a little bit of time left at the end for any further discussions. I'm also going to or someone is going to put a link in the chat for you. So if you should get lost, a PDF file in there will have a link to the mural board. It'll have a link to the Zoom call that we're on now in case you need to come back there, the meetup announcement, and then the PDF file. So I might ask my colleagues to do that for us now. And then I think, unless there are any other thoughts on that, we can get started. So Kurt.
All right.
Would you like to go on?
Yeah, so just to mention that when you click the link that Tom has just put up, you get into the mural board there, and you will see those questions repeated. So pick on them. Otherwise, there was a link also in the chat for a PDF of what Paul has just shown. So you can click that one and see the questions again that can guide your discussion. So that should be okay. And we've set out breakout rooms so that you should be able to join them yourself where you want to be. You can leave and visit another place if you like that. And we're going to give you 15 minutes for this conversation here. And some of you may recognize this sort of shortened down version of the format that's called open space. But we've decided some questions beforehand and announced them on the room. So we encourage you also to help each other facilitate. We have not pre-agreed with anybody on how they should do it from the beginning. So let's send you out in the rooms unless there are any other questions right now. Just looking out for, it seems to be all right. So I'll start the breakout rooms and you can choose which one you want to go into.
I didn't know that there was a feature to join whatever room you want. I've usually seen a manual move or automatic allocation, but volunteer. It's the agile idea of volunteering for things, so it's really good. And
the first time we've done that.
Yeah, it's good.
And back again.
All right, everybody's back. So we would be very interested, as that was the first time we've done an exercise like that. We would be very interested to hear your views on how it all worked out. So you don't have to speak up, but if you want to leave us a note in the chat, that would be wonderful. So I think that what we'd like to do now is we'd like to get involved. And I think what we're going to do is we're just going to go through each of the 4 questions, take about 5 minutes over each. I'll pick on some of the things that I've noticed on the mural board there. My colleagues will do the same, and then we'll just start to get going on it. So, gentlemen, I don't know if you've been looking in here too, but the first question was, how does agile management, what does agile management mean where you live? And this didn't seem to be one of the most popular questions, but one of the comments there was that it was a democratic rather than authoritarian way of working in tech, still struggling to make that shift to other industries. Does anybody want to kick off and say something about that? Kurt, do you have any thoughts on that? I know that you have experience of using this in other industries.
Yeah, well, I think it's correct. Democratic is certainly one term of it, but there's I see in the same group there are other indicators of what they mean with it, and I particularly like the one that is taken from Stanley McChrystal there. Be a gardener, not a chess master. You don't move people around anymore. You don't tell them exactly what to do. You get them involved, and as a leader, your job is to prepare the soil. And it's true that it's probably happened most in high tech, but in all kinds of product development. And we certainly feel a strong surge towards trying to get it to work in other industries, not least after the COVID crisis. So Tom, do you have something to add though?
Well, I wrote an article on LinkedIn about this week.
Yes.
I put it in the chat. I mean, And interestingly, in my MBA program, we were talking about organizational strategy this semester, past semester that just ended. So I've mentioned to people in the past that there's still academically, at least in the United States, traditional management is still the topic that's taught in undergraduate and graduate programs. I did a search to see if there was anything around Agile and management in any university in the United States, and I got zero returns on any programs around that. So one of the problems I think we're faced with is nobody knows Agile management remains undefined. And to a lot of people, it seems as a conundrum, you know. In fact, somebody wrote in here on one of the boards, there is no management when it comes to Agile. The problem is there is management in organizations, especially traditional ones. So if you think there's no management, I think you're either being naive or you're being ignorant about it, because there is. I mean, I've seen it. And this is the problem we're faced with, is when you don't change the culture, you don't change the metrics around how people are measured, you can call it whatever you want, but if I still have accountabilities and responsibilities traditionally oriented towards management, it's a very dangerous thing for me to move out of that. Personally, it would be dangerous for a manager to do that, because that's how I'm measured. So that becomes a problem, I think. And I think it's a big problem in the United States. I can't comment on Europe, but in the United States, it continues to be a persistent, ongoing problem here.
Yeah. Mario, what do you think?
Yeah, I would agree. There is, I mean, we need to talk about this and see how we can define whatever HR management means in a particular context. Otherwise, there's a vacuum, and that vacuum creates a lot of friction. At least that's what I can sense, right? Because then all of a sudden you have opinions and directions from management, and they have maybe other opinions which are more agile. They are useful too, but they're ignored. And then, well, that doesn't create a good, healthy culture. So I think the first step is really making it transparent and talking about it. Yeah.
May I say something?
Please go ahead, Klaus.
Yeah, just in comment to what Tom said, I think Louis saying that in all self-organizing systems or agile systems, which I kind of equalize here, you need to have self-correcting systems. So whenever you have kind of whenever you're going in a wrong direction, and you can measure that in some way by feeling or actually measurement, then you need to look at how you can make a self-correcting system. And I think that's I think it's a really good guidance, because of course, as he says, we need structure. It's like, you know, a lot of people think, because when I think in the Scrum guide or something, it's like they read it like you need no planning. Of course, you need plans still. Maybe if you are in a complex system, you need shorter plans and iterations and so on. But you still need planning for the next 2 weeks, or maybe you need a longer plan if you're going to build a big factory. You need it.
Yeah.
So
Martin,
Okay,
Martin, Martin Henschel, what? Raise your hand.
Thank you for that. I was wondering, maybe I missed it, because I admit I did join a bit late. But is there a difference? Are we defining a difference between agile management and agile leadership? Are we saying they're the same thing?
I think we might be asking the question is it the same thing? And is it different where in different places? I mean, we have a widely international group here. It may be different in different places. Kurt, did you have something?
Just wanted to add the way that's my personal view is that I normally, whenever I speak about it or teach about it, talk about that we're going for leadership here, and I rarely talk about management, because it's sort of it points back to the traditional way of doing things. Now, of course, quite a lot of agile teams, a product development team, we're currently just working with one of them. They exist as sort of a drains attachment to a traditional organization. So they have to deal with it. There is management somewhere that has to be satisfied, otherwise you won't get paid.
Yeah.
And so normally I would over on the agile side, I would talk about leadership instead of management. Doesn't mean that there is no such thing as accountability or decision making. That still exists. There are boundaries, there are constraints, hopefully enabling constraints.
Yeah, I can see that we should have allowed a lot more time for this, but maybe we can just move on quickly to the next question, so we have a chance to get through everything. So the next question: what is the most misunderstood aspect of agile management? And this seems to be the single most popular question on the mural board. And then I think more or less to what a moment ago, one of the notes there was, what has management got to do with agile? What's the benefit of agile when you don't change the organization, so on and so forth. Management is not something that is done in an agile team. Tom, do you want to pick up on some of those things there?
Well, are you asking me? I'm sorry.
I am. Yeah, you're Tom.
Yeah. So let's, my sense of this is, that's a great question. What's management got to do with agile? And we could discuss that ad nauseum, right? But the problem is, I think, is management is the big elephant in the room, and at least in the States here. I mean, it's not something that can be ignored. And if you want to transform management into something that aligns with philosophically with being agile, then that's an organizational structural change, and it's a cultural change. Mm-hmm. And for many companies, and companies that have been around for many, many years, like the one I work for, they're not really, they're what we call an innate culture. They're not really, they're not an adaptive culture. And so it's difficult for them to see the reasoning behind why we would want to do that, because they're comfortable with the current culture, and this is where we saw a collision, right? Where I worked is in the lower levels of where we were working and being agile, it was not getting through what I call the agility ceiling. It wasn't getting up above. In fact, it was causing consternation up above. Now, this is dated now, because this was 10 years ago, but it's a problem. And Ken Schwaber told me, he goes, let me tell you something. You're going to find this immediately in your organization, when he was mentoring me in this. And he was absolutely right. I mean, it hit me right in the face. It was a huge problem. Yeah. Yeah. And I talk about it in that LinkedIn article, because I asked one guy that was working with me, a prominent person in the Agile community, when do you think it'll be Agile here? And he goes, it won't be until your current management turns over or leaves, because they're indoctrinated, they're educated in being managers. That's the expectation of them. And I'm one to say leadership and management are not the same thing. Mm-hmm. Right, but that doesn't cause me to be able to ignore my responsibilities in management if I'm in management.
Yeah. It seems quite clear from a lot of the things that have been put on the post-it notes that people feel that there is some kind of a conflict. Well, there is a conflict in the organization, that you've got people who want to be agile, but you've still got this residual hierarchical management hanging over everything.
I mean, Jürgen Apollo attacked, and I don't mean in a violent way, but he attacked the existing management structure in organizations when he wrote Management 3.0. I mean, that's exactly what he was trying to convey, is the transitionary process that's got to go on in management. And he laid it out. Some people have mentioned his book down below. He laid it out pretty succinctly. But again, it was in 2011, that was a radical idea. The whole idea of Management 3.0 was a radical idea.
Yeah. Mario, do you want to add anything to that?
Yeah, I think it's very interesting to zoom in a little bit more on the differences of leadership and management. And if you go back to the Agile Manifesto and we see the introduction sentence, right, that it's about maybe adaptiveness, what Kurt and Tom already said, and also where Martin's question maybe pointed towards. So it's also about that management need to adjust, and then hopefully towards something which we call nowadays leadership, which means actually then management becomes part of the team which is doing the work and part of the responsibility of succeeding, not delegating it and making it obligation for the others, but being part of achieving the vision. So that is at least important for me in that discussion.
I think Craig Larman outlined the laws of organizational behavior years and years ago, and they still apply today. I mean, we see it. But the other thing is that what we have found is in organizations that flatten their hierarchy, there's much more propensity for management to embrace agility a lot more, because the span of control goes very broad. And when you place that much span on somebody, it's impossible for them to micromanage. They just can't do it. You know, I've got too many people reporting to me, so I have to rely on them to manage themselves. You know, that's effectively what I've got to do. So I think, and I mentioned this in my LinkedIn article, one of the things that we see that's very positive in organizations is when they reduce their hierarchical structure down to a flat structure. That is, you know, anywhere from 3 to 5 levels, and certainly no more than 7.
Do you have a quick comment on that before we move on?
Just a quick comment on the magic numbers. The numbers of like from 3 to 9, or say 5 plus minus 2, etc. They've been around at least since the Parkinson's law book was published, like when he was writing for The Economist. But turns out, based on recent neural research, that actually average human is able to process successfully around 4 objects at max. Kind of, that's a limitation of human brain hardware. So it sounds like, you know, what you say about number of levels, it's basically not humanly possible really to live in structures where there's 6, 7 or more layers of hierarchy protruding above, and you just forget, you know, that you're the same with them, you know, lost the belonging maybe.
Kurt, did you have something?
Very good observation. And not only does it apply to the levels of management, and I do think that you can get down to a very small number actually, if that's your goal. The other thing I would say, that number also applies to the number of people that you interact with. And one behind me is a drawing of Cynefin, Dave Snowden's model. And as you move towards chaos, the number of people that can actually work together gets smaller, and you get into the 3 and 4 in chaos, no more than that. At the less chaotic and more orderly domains, you can be more people because you don't need to interact with all of them at the same time. So there's like the teams get smaller and smaller as you move counterclockwise. Anti-clockwise. So.
Okay, so sorry to rush everybody, but maybe we just need to move on. So question number 3 was, what do you find most challenging about agile management in your region? And a few comments on here, and one was like, only teams are changing, not the hierarchy. People in the hierarchy that have pushed the teams to work agile becomes an extra burden on the working people. If it means it is somewhat redundant, if it means a position, it is somewhat redundant. Mario, do you want to kick off on that one?
Well, I think that is right to the point. It is still that we have management. That's what we discussed maybe so far. And on top of it, we try to leverage a little more extra performance, and that's where we do Agile, right? And we can also think of where do we use Agile, or maybe even in particular Scrum, in the organizational chart, right? And then it's mostly in the development department, right? So many things before and after is still in a traditional way. And then somewhere in between, we do Scrum and Agile thingies. But of course, that is not the purpose of it. And that gives you not the leverage you could have, the benefits you could have if you would commit more to it. So that's why I think it's very important to educate people in a friendly way so that management had their times. And if you want to sustain for the future the organization, then maybe you need to open up and think more about how you can act as a leader and facilitate leadership across the teams and across maybe what is right now the structure.
Yeah. All right. I'm not going to throw this open any further because we're running out of time. And the last question seemed to get a lot of interest in it. So maybe if you don't mind, gentlemen, we can move straight onto the final question. So we have a few minutes to catch up at the end there. So the question is, how is the performance of Agile managers measured? And you can see if you've looked at the post-it notes here, there's a lot of input on that. And the one that caught my eye was a measure increase in customer value. There's other ones there, build a safe. So talking about psychological safety there. Another one, help match people's skills and interests for the roles, improve capabilities of the team. Kurt, we didn't give you much of a chance to talk the last time. Would you like to on that?
Well, I can. I think this is very much still in the early phases of figuring out a good way of doing it, because we have to measure different things. As Tom was saying, as long as we keep measuring the same thing and rewarding the same thing, it's going to stay the same way, because the extrinsic motivator of the hierarchy, especially coupled with exuberant pay at the top, is such a strong attractor that most of us cannot resist the temptation to go for it. You, like Stanley McChrystal says in the army, you either move up or you move out. And therefore, measuring, getting new metrics that you're going to evaluate on. In the new year, we're going to get one of the webinars with one of the key players from Norway, where this actually is, I think, is implemented in quite a few places. And one of the places we've been so lucky to be involved in is a company called RiksTV. So they're sort of a TV supplier, or a supplier of TV channels and content and what have you. And they've gone the full Monty with this, and they have come up with these interesting metrics of how is the leadership team, again, not the individual, the team, evaluated on how well they provide an environment for the people. And they've tried different ways. Experimentation, as always, recommended, and that's something I look very much forward to. I'm not an expert on metrics. I know that you have to be extremely careful with being too fast on the trigger with metrics, because otherwise you get all sorts of nasty side effects. But I think you need to basically go back to acknowledge that you're in a complex territory. Therefore, you need to rely on people's stories and the interpretation of stories instead of simple numbers. There are simple numbers that are definitely indicators. If you have a high turnover, that means people are leaving quickly your company. I would get suspicious. Maybe we need to sharpen up here. Or, of course, other metrics like that could be indicators. But listen to people's stories, try to evaluate the stories. What do they mean by them? How do we get people to tell more positive stories of their experience of being in the company?
Tom or Mario, do you have any comments on that?
No, I just thought maybe we could see what the Agile Lean Leadership Framework has to provide on that perspective. Right. So to maybe wrap it up a little bit and also share a little bit of the content Agile Lean Leadership is providing. Maybe if you, I'm not sure, Kurt or Paul, if you could maybe
I think we can hand that over to Kurt. That's a good
slide. That would be would fit very much the discussion which we have right now.
Yeah, looks like we should have had 2 hours for this.
Because those principles, I think some of the aspects we quite brought them in the discussion so far to the point, and maybe we can summarize the aspects with that.
No. Yeah, it's so want me to do that, Paul?
Yes, I think so, Kurt, please.
Okay. Well, first of all, we discussed to do this as the last concert in the season here before Christmas, to try this format out, and we didn't know whether people would be interested or not. And and of course the case is that if people are interested, we could do with more time. If they're not interested, it better be short. So this was a compromise. And we actually did discuss whether we could organize a sort of an online conference for this, but there's a lot of people trying to discuss this subject. Let us just try to summarize a little bit that what we have done, where it started out some years ago with a group of us, Scandinavian Scrum trainers. Christian is here, Arne Olander is on the road somewhere in Sweden, and the guy Amshu was also part of it. And we sort of said, what's going to be the next thing after Scrum and Agile? Because it sort of was well established at the team level. How about scaling out these principles to the rest of the organization? Like there's a question in the chat, who says we've got to have a hierarchy? Well, actually, nobody said that. It was something the Prussians invented in their army, 1840s. And who says it's got to be like that in the 21st century? So what I would like to is just give you a few ideas of what we have tried to come up with in what we call Agile Lean Leadership. Set of values and principles that you can use to direct your actions toward it, and a structure that you can go for. It's a little bit like, you know, Scrum is not everything. It's a good starting point, but you are supposed to develop from that. Once you get the hang of it, you get into this shu-ha-ri, learn the basics, adapt to your specialities, get into the flow, and get it to a sort of intuitive way of working in the end. So the principles that we have tried to define here, there are 16 principles. I won't read them all. You can get it afterwards, but there are we've drawn them in sort of a semicircle. Everything, all the principles that you can look at as a one with leadership responsibilities. What is it you should go for? And for example, number 16 at the top. Be transparent and never use fear as a leadership instrument, as fear leads to distortion of data or systems. And so there are these 16 principles that we try to distill them out. And I'm sure you could find 16 other important ones, but this is a starting point. And whenever you make a decision, you can plot it in the radar chart and say, well, how much do I actually think this decision is supportive of that principle? Now, not all decisions support all principles, but obviously you want to pull out to the periphery. And so we discuss that a lot in our training about this. And we also have a structure for how we want to build an organization. So let's say you want to build an organization that is not necessarily hierarchical. And where do we start? Well, we go back to the principles of lean. In fact, we go back to good old Deming, US, the war effort during the Second World War. And after that, he went to Japan and helped Japan get into a better shape and being a highly regarded industrial nation instead of a producer of crappy goods. And so what do? They focus on the customer first. Customer first. Who is it that we are serving with whatever we do? Try and describe those customers, those beneficiaries of your services. Think about how can we put together some ideal teams that will service these customers and give them the best possible experience, the best possible value. And how do they relate? So obviously customer A and B both require something from E, and B sometimes something from F. And these circles here, the teams, the generalized teams, are like Scrum teams. There's team members here, there's a product owner, there's a Scrum Master, and they work more or less like that. Now, sometimes you can't do that with a small team. I mean, it's ideal with a small team, but maybe the customers need more. And you can either scale up, like having more teams work on the same backlog with the same product owner, somewhat close to what Craig Larman and the less people talk about. Or you could scale out and say, well, actually, we can create a team behind the scenes. And we know that handovers are bad, but sometimes we need to compromise. And we have someone behind the scenes who do not have customers out in the external world, but they have E and F as customers. H has E and F as customers. And there might be more of those. We call those relationship, and we call what goes on there delegation. So something from E's backlog, and an item on the backlog is delegated to H. Actually, they're doing the work for us, and they are delivering back to us. Now, that's not ideal. That's handovers are bad, but so are big teams. What's the least bad? What is the best compromise when you have to build a large organization? And you can tap in your suppliers as well. And you've already guessed it. This is the value stream that we have from Lean. So now, okay, we've got all that in place. Now, how does cross-team decisions get made when they need to be made? We have something that we call resolution circles. So issues and ideas are escalated. If we get stuck here, we can't. Everything we can negotiate bilaterally, of course, it's better. But sometimes we need to get together at the tactical level. The team members need to meet and discuss, how do we solve this? When are you done with using that facility? We need to use it as well. There are dependencies in the real world, although we like to assume that they don't exist. We used to call this yellow one the tactical scrum of scrums in the old days. And we have a similar one for strategy. When we need to prioritize how we're going to deal with this, this customer came with a request we've never seen before. We are actually not really prepared, he says. How are we going to deal with that? And they escalate, and who decides here? These are the product owners from down here in the value stream. They sit together and say, let's just behave like grown-ups and see if we can make a decision for the common good. One of them has a star on the shoulder so he can break any deadlock, and how he gets that star is another matter that probably doesn't need to be determined very rigidly, but maybe he's elected, maybe he's the owner, who knows. In the end, there is always something about ownership, and therefore some kind of limitations. Now, we've got most of it in place here, but there is something that was good about the hierarchy, and that was to be together with people of the same skill sets. And what we implement here is what we call secondary circles. They're down here, and they are handling cross-cutting concerns from the value stream. So they might be designers, they might be system architects, they might be marketing people, they might be testers, or another skill set that goes across the team in the value stream, and they get together and they coordinate and decide on common matters here. Some of you have read about Spotify and their guilds and chapters. That's actually what we're emulating here. Finally, we do have what we call a transient team. If you experience a sudden drop into chaos, something that's completely blowing your normal operation away, mostly negative, but there are sometimes positive drops into chaos, like an unexpected opportunity, but mostly it is problematic. And you put together a very small team down to the 3 and 4 again, with the best skill sets, and let them operate to see if they can stabilize the situation. And this is sort of the drawing we operate from. This is not perfect, and this is not the only way of doing it, but like Scrum, we claim it's a good starting point. There is a way to build such an organization, should you so desire.
Yes, Kurt, and thank you for that, Kurt. We are out of time, but there are a few things that we still want us to say. So we understand if people have to leave, but if you can bear with us for a few more minutes, I think you're welcome to stay. So just a few things. So here are this slide contains some references to Agile Lean House and our educational resources. There's some articles there on the screen. We have an online workflow tool called Agemba. There's a link to that there, and then there's some contact information for the participants on our side of this today. And of course, you'll feel free to contact any of us. We're going to give you a PDF after this, which is going to have the content of the presentation in it. And I think it's going to include the mural board. Kurt, is that right?
Should do, yeah.
Yeah. So you should get all that, and you should also feel free to contact any of us if you want to talk about this further or have any more exchanges with us. It will be fine. I think the final thing now is just to turn it over to Anne, who is just going to say a few things about us and what happens next. So Anne, can I hand it over to you?
Yes, of course. Yes. So like Paul said, the organization or business behind this meetup is Agile Manifesto. We are a smaller business based in Denmark, but with an international outlook. Here it's sort of represented like a house, where Agile Manifesto looks like the roof, but we are dependent on and rely on an experienced and very strong network, which the panel present today represents. We try to support people and organizations in their journey, trying to work in an agile way. We usually say we try to help people harvest more value out of their efforts, and we do that in usually we say 3 ways. Here it has 5 columns. So the 3 things are teaching, coaching, and making tools. And teaching is sometimes the courses you see here, product owner courses and Scrum Master courses, and build-ons for that, like advanced courses as well. And sometimes it's courses that dive deeper into Agile Lean leadership, as you had like a quick look at here, and how to really do that if you want to apply that in your organization. And we do coaching, consultancy, and we have we work on several kinds of software tools. The biggest one is Gemba, which is a workflow tool that especially caters to those who have strategic responsibilities. So it's really made with product owners in mind. It has a lot of functionalities that help in planning and prioritizing and such. And then I just wanted to show also the next meetup we have planned. We have several that are underway, but this one has a date and is on Meetup, but you can find it. It's on the 12th of January, where Robert Fuchsjar, who is also a network member, he will talk about retrospectives as we enter the new year. So very welcome there, and thank you for joining and participating tonight, and also on the mural boards. So thank you very much.
I put the mural board PDF out in the chat. So if people want to download it, they're welcome to do that. So PDF of the mural board is in the chat.